Quantum Leap, Season 2, Episode 3. Shall we talk about whatever outlandish situation it is that Ben finds himself in this week? Let's get into it with my review. Let's do it. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my review for Season 2, Episode 3 of Quantum Leap, entitled Closure Encounters. Now, in this episode here, Ben finds himself leaping into the body of Agent Robert Cook. The year is 1949 and he is an alien investigator, an agent for the Bureau who investigates these alien sightings that were very prominent in that sort of era, or were coming into prominence. He works for Project Sign, which is a predecessor to Project Blue Book. We open with a scene where Ben leaps in to like a farm, and there's this fella who's telling him about his cows being abducted, little green men in the woods. He goes and investigates this, only to find that it's children just sort of playing games. We get no, the cow abduction thing, we don't know nothing about that, but that's not the main story. The main story is something else. It's happening down in New Mexico, where these two girls have been involved in this car crash, named Carrie and Melanie. Now, Melanie is in a coma and Carrie faces going to prison for manslaughter for her part in this car accident. But she is the granddaughter of the sheriff, Russell Hunt. Now, the sheriff wants to prove her innocence, but knows that after the loss of her mother, she's kind of going off of the rails. But this leads to an investigation where they have to find out the truth about these potential UFO sightings and these aliens, believing it to be a helicopter that has caused the accident and this sort of a thing. But there's a fella who's the father of Melanie, the friend, who wants to get Carrie put away, and this leads to thugs and all this sort of a thing, and like I said, they investigate the situation, military goings on, that kind of nonsense that you get in these sort of stories. Now, this episode here, yet again, this show throws us into a very outlandish situation, and this is my gripe with the show, because as an individual episode, I thought it was very good. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought the actor who played the sheriff was very good, very strong choice there, and I liked what the show was doing with the Ben and Addison stuff and the acceptance, hence the title, Closure Encounters. Closure. Ben has to get some closure for what's gone on, for the leap in time, for the Addison moving on with someone else who we come to find out that she's been with for 8 months. Her new fella isn't in this episode whatsoever. Now, I thought that was a good story concept, focusing on that and the impact of that, and I liked the emotional journey that Ben goes through in this episode. You know, the sort of anger, the sort of almost self-harm, in a sense, in that he doesn't mind putting himself into situations where potentially he could get harmed. This sort of thing is prevalent within the story. Unfortunately, it's a kind of one and done story, in that by the end of it he's got over it and we're going to move on from that, which is a shame, because it was made for a nice dynamic, different dynamic between him and Addison before we get back to the status quo, so to speak. All the support cast in this, there isn't really any story going on in the modern timeline. It's just them helping Ben, this sort of a thing, and helping Addison get over her problems. She needs closure as well, and whether she should really be the person that's still his hologram and all that sort of nonsense. There's no big overarching story there happening. We do come to find out that Janice is working for the NSA in Hawaii in a kind of throwaway line from Ian, and that's about it really. So yeah, it's a good episode, and I enjoyed the episode. It's just like I said, it's every episode has to be an outlandish kind of a situation. Now the story in this could have been it was a very strong personal story about car crash, the blame and all this sort of a thing. Now, if you had that story and ejected all of the alien stuff, all of the UFO stuff, and just focused on that as a story element, it could have been far more grounded, and that's the kind of storytelling that I'm looking for in this show. It's kind of like a complete reversal of the original Quantum Leaps, where okay, you had these outlandish stories every now and then in that, where things were a bit sort of weirder, but a lot of them were smaller scale stories, more personal stories, and unfortunately this is, like I said, this is kind of a reversal in that those sort of stories are very few and far between, or they are within the construct of the bigger picture, bigger episode story, but they're surrounded by this outlandish, unbelievable plot, shall we say, that normal people just aren't involved in. Like I said, the crash side of it, fair enough. People get into crashes all the time, and the justice system does them wrong, so that would be a good focus. But to have the alien stuff is just that little bit extra sort of unbelievability to it. So I crave this smaller scale storytelling, this more personal story without that. Something that I believe that as just a normal Joe Blogs on the street, that I could potentially be involved in, or I could see a person I know be involved in. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I think it comes down to ratings, and that they've got to have these things go on every week that are sort of unbelievable, to try and get more and more people on board the show, because they don't think that the show could hold itself with just strong stories. The one thing I will say about this episode is there wasn't really any overly tick box woke agenda exercise to the plot in 1949. Now that was a good, it felt like 1949, because you didn't inject anything in there that didn't necessarily need to be there, and that's another criticism of this show that I have, that they tend to do that at times, and they don't need to. They don't need to appease a certain minority, a certain group, by tick boxing. I mean, you've got that in the overall story arc with Ian anyway, in the present day. Now, Ian in the present day is a good reflection of society today, and no issue with that whatsoever. But when you start injecting that into the story elements, into the past, when it isn't really necessary, it kind of gets my back up a little bit. So it was nice to see this episode didn't really feel the need to do that. You could say it probably done it with the character, the woman that was in I can't remember the character's name, who was in the diner. But no, it worked. It worked well. It didn't feel forced or anything like that. That felt like a good reflection of women coming out of the war and, experiencing what they experienced by doing what they did and helping out the war effort. And then when it all came to an end, they're back to sort of just generic kind of work and jobs. So that was a nice addition to it as well. So step back and take a look at the bigger picture, and it's elaborate story after elaborate story after elaborate story, but as an individual episode goes, it was very strong, it was very good, and I enjoyed it immensely. And I'll be back next week with a review and my thoughts on whatever we get into this time around. And by the teaser, looked like another elaborate episode, and I had to go back and check whether that was the same actor. The fella at the end that we were introduced to in the new Leap, whether it was the same fella who played the sheriff here. They looked so much alike. Is that just me? Am I missing something here? Let me know in the comments down below.